Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm joined by Lior Gantz, editor of Wealth Research Group, where he discusses investment principles, stocks, gold, and passive income. Today, we're going to get his forecast for both the gold and silver markets and find out which areas of the market he's currently looking for both growth and yield. We are going to talk, of course, about Trump's tariffs now going through on Mexico, Canada, and China. What does this mean for those respective economies, as well as financial markets, and so much more? Strap yourselves in for my conversation with Lior Gantz. Lior Gantz, great to have you back on the show. I want to start with a broad question that I ask every guest. It's been a while since I've had you on. You can take this wherever you'd like, but I'm wondering, what are the main themes and trends you're currently watching when it comes to financial markets, the economy, geopolitics? What are you watching right now that you think more investors should be paying attention to?
I think the Trump administration, this particular Trump administration, is essentially orchestrating an entirely new world order. It's not new in terms of it's never been tried before, but it's new in terms of the living population of the world, because for every person living, they have not ever experienced what the Trump administration is building. If you look at the ideas that the Trump administration is forming, they are going back to before the 1890s, when the progressive ideology and the administrative state in the United States took roots through Theodore Roosevelt and then through Woodrow Wilson. And that brought you the Federal Reserve, that brought you income tax, that got you involved in two world wars, the Great Depression. I mean, I can go on and on. The 20th century is the birth of the administrative state and the progressive ideologies that took root throughout the West. And have morphed and got to a radical place. The idea originally of the administrative state, as it was formed by like the naive builders of it, was that, hey, how about instead of politicians who need to cater to the audience, right? Need to give the audience what it wants to hear, or I mean, I don't mean the audience, I mean the voters, what they want to hear, or the general population. How about we have a class of these academics, nonpartisan people that can run this economy or this country objectively? That was like the formulating idea, but it quickly proved to be a theoretical idea, not rooted in reality. And anyways, that is, and if you want to understand this, Trump actually recommended a book called The American Leviathan that explains this. But where we are going is into a world where the United States takes a new position. It's a position that it's held throughout its formulative years, and it obviously dictates to the rest of the world how they should behave, because America is the largest economy and the largest military. Where we are going is into a world where America focuses on itself first, just like in a plane that loses its oxygen and the masks come down. What they tell you in the instructions is to first put on the mask for yourself and then put it on your children. And America is in a place where it has no oxygen, and the masks have come down, but you have this class of politicians that are ignoring the masks. They're just treating it as if there's still oxygen for everyone. All the while, their adversaries are seeing the problem and are building towards it, but they're trying to convince these Western politicians that no, you're fine. These would be your China, your Russia, your Iran, etc. These more authoritarian type governments that are opposed to Western cultures and Western society. Where this is going is into a very healthy state where every country focuses on itself first. And if it has the merit and the capabilities and the assets and the demographics to thrive, then it will form joint ventures, coalitions, trade routes with the United States or with China and Russia, and the world that is not the Western world. And those that don't will probably be consolidated. So we will move from a world of 200 countries to far less, because we are moving back into a world of merit and away from the vision of Woodrow Wilson and the progressives, where every group of people, every nation has the right to self-determination. That got abused, basically. So as an investor, what I'm watching right now are three main things. One, I am watching how successful this reset in the United States is. Because if it is very successful, then voters in most other countries will want the same thing. They will want their own version of Doge. They will want the same transparency. They will want the same type of politicians that tell you, hey, promises made, promises kept. They will want those that focus on their countries first. And they will want those that respect their own national identity, their own culture, etc. So that's the first thing I'm watching. And the first 100 days are the easiest for President Trump. He just, he rams all of these things through without much opposition. But believe me, after 100 days, this will be different. And the second thing I'm watching is how Europe behaves, because Europe is traditionally Western. Like, you think of Europe, you think of Western values, but they are not the same as American values at all. Europe is very different than the United States. So what I'm really intrigued, and what will shape the future a lot, is how the European Union, which is the world's largest market outside of the United States, how those two behave. And that is critical. And the third thing is how China deals with everything that's going on. China has a terrible, unstable economy that was largely based on the West acting as if China is this developing country and it can bypass all these rules. Now that these laws are going to be, now that we look at China as an existential enemy that can really disrupt the West, then we need to see what happens in that sort of a country. The Hans, the main culture in China, is not monotheistic. If you study Chinese history, what they really believe is that the gods give them a strong government, and that strong government protects them. But the people, the Hans, believe, this is in their culture, that if the government does not function well, then they have the divine right to create a revolution. That's why you see so many revolutions in China throughout the centuries. So 1.2 billion people in a revolution, that would be chaotic. So those are the main three things that I'm watching. The successful disruption of the deep state, the clash between Western American values and Western European values, and China's ability, or the CCP's ability, to build its country in the wake or in the end of this American appeasement program.
Hey guys, just a quick break to hear from our sponsor today, ARC, Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personalized service and competitive prices with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the comments left on this YouTube channel about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy precious metals, I recommend Ian at ARC Silver. He is a straight shooter. So go to arcsgo.com and contact Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. Well, let's talk about the Europe versus USA narrative that's come up. Obviously, Canada as well. We're seeing tariffs implemented on Canada, Mexico, and China. There was discussion of tariffs on the European Union as well. Obviously, we saw the EU and the US go in completely different directions when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Trump and his team seemingly want to end the war as soon as possible, whereas the EU leaders are screaming, scratching, crawling at just doing anything they can to keep this war going. So talk to us about that dynamic that's occurring right now. Are we looking at a complete breakdown in diplomacy between the EU and the US? This would include the UK as well. And what are the implications here?
Great question. The original vision of the founding fathers was that we are leaving the monarchies, we are leaving the old continent, and we are moving to a new continent. And in this new continent, the rules are very different from these monarchs that rule over Europe. And that was the original dynamic between Europe and the United States. Therefore, the Americans fought the British, then fought the French and the Spaniards, etc. The fifth president of the United States was a very impactful one called James Monroe, and he created the Monroe Doctrine. And he said basically, we are an ocean away from all of these past troubles. We should mind our own business and never, ever intervene in the old continent. And his doctrine of isolationism took root in the United States. There are still people today that are like, no, I don't want to be part of anything. But the world has changed, obviously, and the world of the mid-1800s and today is vastly different. You cannot physically create isolationism. But the evolving doctrines from the Monroe Doctrine is that the United States should take care of itself, be as self-sufficient as possible, and then it can create strong alliances in other parts of the world, not military alliances, but economic alliances, which obviously are backstopped by American military might. And doing that, they are creating a situation where, from a security standpoint, neither the Chinese, the Russians, or any other adversary that looks to threaten them can project that kind of a power. And that's essentially what the United States doctrine is. But then came the idea that that the United States should, for some reason, intervene. The first thing was World War I, the second was World War II, and then America completely changed, with the idea of the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is it's un-American. Today we call that American. The Europeans are like, no, you're our daddy. That's what you saved us. But this is the un-American way. Now, in World War I, the Americans really intervened for the first time after the Germans created the submarines and were able to actually threaten the United States. With submarines, they wanted to dock them in Mexico. They had a lot of ambitious plans. In World War II, the Americans actually started to intervene after Pearl Harbor, so after they were attacked in Japan. But Bretton Woods was this idea that America should protect Europe from communism and from the Soviets that would have easily conquered Europe through permanent security operations. And that idea defeated the Soviets, but from the 1990s onwards, it has created a situation that the United States cannot sustain. Because of the rise of China and other formidable powers, the United States Navy cannot function as it did during the Cold War, and the American taxpayer cannot fund this structure any longer. And that is reality. And therefore, America is pulling back from this. It's asking Europe to become what it should be, which is to defend its own sovereignty, each country and as a union, if they choose to remain as a union, and also reciprocal trade. The Bretton Woods Agreement is basically the best ever trade agreement to other countries. The United States patrols the trade routes that lead ships towards it at their own dime. Then the importers bring merchandise and services and goods from Europe and other countries, sell them into the United States, and the consumer, which provides all of this abundance to other countries, is also taxed by the United States government. So the structure is now flipped. In Donald Trump's mind, and in many other American minds, obviously because he was voted, the premium market, which is the United States, should be paid to get entered into. You should pay us in order to enter this beautiful market that we built for 249 years. And therefore, the tariffs come in. And these are reciprocal tariffs. In other words, he's not punishing other countries, but creating a fair trade. This is obviously going to expose countries that don't have merit and viability to sustain themselves. So that is a huge change. It looks as if the United States and Europe are pulling apart, but it's actually it won't end up being that way. It will just reset all these trade agreements between these two countries seriously based on merit and on reality, not subsidies or other forms of like USAID and other forms of transfer of wealth between the United States and Europe.
Well, talk to us about the tariffs a little bit more, because you're saying it sounds like your opinion is that these can actually be a positive thing for both the United States and the tariffed country. Am I hearing that right? And like what is the merit of tariffing Canada, for example? Obviously, this has Canadians in a fit, and talking about not traveling to America, not buying American products, etc. Are they missing the bigger picture?
The tariffs are used for three things. One is a negotiating tool. So, in order to create the United States that the Trump administration looks to create, it needs to dissolve all previous trade agreements, relationships, etc. One of the ways to do that is to say, hey, we're going to, effective this date, we're going to slap tariffs. That is a threat, a negotiation tool. From there, many things can happen. But the idea is, if you keep on the same route that you are right now, you will have tariffs and you will need to deal. And many of your industries will actually go bust. So you probably want to renegotiate with us. That's one way to think of it. The second thing is a revenue source. The United States, if it looks to lower corporate taxes and other forms of tax without cutting on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, which the Trump administration has promised it will not touch Social Security, then you need that extra source of revenue to come in if you're going to lower taxes to the United States for corporations to come and manufacture in the United States. So, secondly, it's a source of revenue. So, negotiating tool, source of revenue, and the third thing that the tariffs are doing, and this is towards the countries that are more of a adversarial to the United States, like China, it creates the format by which these countries can show their partner nations, how they can handle a world in which the two countries are effectively in a trade war. And there are many countries that are on the fence. Which side should I take? Is China the leader or the United States? And what Trump is trying to do is expose which country is more robust. I'll give you an example. Mexico. Mexico has been in close ties with the Chinese and with the Americans. It needs to choose sides, especially because it's on the southern border of the United States. Other countries that are between sides are the Arab nations. Another country was Germany, that was heavily relying on Russian energy and on the Chinese car market. So all of these countries are forced to choose sides. So the third thing is it's ushering in this world where which side are you on? We are not in a globalization or hyper globalization anymore.
Very interesting breakdown. I want to get your thoughts on the precious metals markets here and how you see this entire geopolitical realignment potentially affecting those markets. After the tariffs were announced, markets took quite a beating in general across the board. One thing that does seem to be holding up is gold as well as silver. What are your thoughts on how both precious metals will react up ahead given this new environment, this geopolitical sea change that you see?
If we're going, and we are going into a world where the petrodollar does not exist, it does not exist. The United States is a net exporter of energy. It is effectively telling the Arab nations, you need to redefine yourselves because nobody needs your oil or LNG. We have enough LNG to supply Japan and India, and we will probably supply it to Europe. We have enough oil to supply ourselves. We don't need you. And that is a major change, right? A major change. Think about like all the major wars of the last 3 years have been about oil in the Middle East. And so that's one thing. The second thing that that is interesting about this is that if you don't have the petrodollar, and the United States is roughly 25% of the world's economy, and you're putting on tariffs, you're essentially making the reserve currency a sole reserve currency and an unrealistic idea. It's unrealistic to have one reserve currency when you have barriers of trade between countries. You have to strengthen your own currency or weaken it or whatever you do with it. But the world of a reserve currency that comprises 60% of the world's trades, like the dollar is, it's unrealistic. And so, in my view, most countries will choose to create strategic gold reserves. Some countries that have historical DNAs or cultures around silver, like the Latin American countries, Mexico, perhaps the Chinese and Indians, will also look to create some sort of monetization around silver. The word silver in 70 languages, including Hebrew, where I'm at right now in Tel Aviv, the word money and the word silver, like the metal, are the same. In Hebrew, we say kesef for money, and we say kesef for silver, and that is like throughout the world. I do believe that as countries go back to these sources, that they will go back to some sort of a unofficial backing of their currency with more precious metals. And obviously, the Fort Knox story is just the tip of the iceberg for this.
Yeah, well, fill us in on your thoughts there on what's going on with the audit of Fort Knox and also the potential of the U.S. gold reserves being revalued. This has been a hot topic as of late. Obviously, the gold at the moment valued at $42.22 on the Fed's balance sheet. Do you think they could revalue the gold reserves? What are your thoughts on the Fort Knox audit as well?
Well, let me ask you, would you revalue the gold if you had it?
Yeah, I would.
Of course. Yeah. So that it's common sense, right? So that's what they'll do. They'll revalue the gold. Why what's the deal? What's 42? Like, come on. What are we talking about here? The last real audit was in 1953. There was a partial audit in 1974. There was Muchin and McConnell going in there in August of 2017 and saying, "Hey, it's all here." And then there's an annual review, which Scott Bessent has assured the American public that it's real. That's done every September. Now, if the United States were to revalue it to present day value, it will be worth around $750 billion. So you're not talking about like a big sum, but as you know, the United States is going to build a wealth fund, a sovereign wealth fund, and of course, if you own 147 million ounces, or I don't remember the exact figure, but around 770 billion worth, you're gonna want to put that on your sovereign wealth books as that much, especially when Basel One gave you a mark to market on it, like it's face value. So why would you not? That's it. That's what I think. I think they'll revalue it. Other countries will then value their own gold, and I think that will spark the public interest in gold in general. Outside of America, they don't. There's no bullion. If you walk around other countries, there's not like bullion stores like in the United States. It's a real subculture that is unique to the United States. In China and in India, they have other forms of ways of buying precious metals, and in Europe, it's mostly it's like jewelry and decorations and stuff like that. They don't have a bullion fascination. So I think, if you look at these facts and the fact that the silver market is so small, the potential here is huge for the revaluation of silver as a precious metals. If it's redefined in the minds of the public as a precious metal, its price will double to triple. It will get that premium value. So that's what I think. I think that the Fort Knox situation is part of a bigger revolution that's happening. It's called the revolution of transparency. It starts with Doge. Yeah, it starts with Doge, and I think you'll see it everywhere.
Give us your thoughts on other commodities outside of the monetary metals, energy, uranium, base metals, agriculture. Is there anything you're watching at the moment that you think is presenting an attractive value proposition?
I think in general, commodities are in a very unique situation because the AI revolution is the largest industrial revolution ever, and it will require an exorbitant amount of electricity and energy that we currently don't have, and there's no slowing it down. That is really the race. It's almost as important as the nuclear race between the Americans and the Soviets. So the reason it's so important is because what's at stake is, if not careful, is monopoly over such technologies that one country, if the wrong country possesses it, it's very, very, very dangerous. I'll give you an example. Medicine. If AI can create medicine, specific types of medicine, and you can tell other countries, hey, we've solved something. Now, if you want to solve this before we actually spread a virus, you have to concede to 1, 2, 3. That is insane. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, in about 4 years, AI will be smarter, not than humans, but collectively smarter than humankind. We are in a very unique situation in history, and therefore, this is a real race, like a real race, and therefore commodities are super important. So, if you look at the United States, for example, I'll just give you an idea. There are many rare earth minerals that are not mined in the United States at all, zero, but are indispensable for military. Copper, super critical, very a lot of import. Uranium that you mentioned, there's 1 or 2 negligible mines in the United States. The rest is imported. Lithium, the same thing. There's 2 or 3 active mines. The rest is imported. These are crazy ideas of hyper-globalization that allow these supply chains to be so vulnerable because of the idea that we are past the times of national interests. So I'm very bullish on commodities in general. You talked agriculture, which is very interesting because for the first time, I think in decades, I think some countries will experience food shortages, and that is weird, right? It's the 21st century, and I believe some countries will have to deal with shortages due to many reasons, but mostly because of just poor management in regards to their trade routes. We need to understand that each country will have to be much more reliant on their own manufacturing and their own supply chain, and that is really bullish for commodities because if you already have, if you can source copper from another country for X amount, or you have to build your own mines now anew and spend all of this capital, then of course the price is going to go up.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. What about outside of the commodity space, perhaps looking towards yield? I know that, first of all, that you have a portfolio of companies that you post on Wealth Research Group, and they're not all commodities. So maybe you could shed some light on other sectors that you're looking at. And for those investors who are maybe looking for yield as well, where would you be looking? Would you be looking at short-term T-bills? Would you be looking at corporate debt, emerging market debt, just high dividend paying stocks? What are your thoughts there?
Okay. First of all, the portfolio is all of them are not commodities. If you download the portfolio, it's wealthresearchgroup.com/portfolio. It's what they are is just companies very well run, world class, number one, number two, number three in their industries, and are really well run. The idea is just to pay great values for them, and the way you do that is you just wait for either market corrections, major dips, or just accumulate over time. And the fact is, if you accumulate over time, the average cost will be advantageous. So I look for excellent management. That's really key. Now, if with regards to yield, okay, I would break it down this way. If you are an accredited investor, yield right now is 10 to 12%. If you call some world-class funds and are able to become an investor in a debt fund, the yields are 10 to 12, and I tell you that from personal experience. It could be real estate backed, private equity backed, or otherwise. If you're looking for debt or for yield solutions that are for non-accredited investors, I think that the better yields are about 6 to 8% right now, and there are great opportunities out there. The fact remains that we have left the zero interest rate world probably forever, but certainly for our lifetimes. And what I think that means is that yields will be normalized. Normalized is 4 to 5% in general. Now, where this becomes interesting is because governments are going to do drastic cutbacks. All major governments are bankrupt effectively, or drowning in debt, and therefore, when you move capital from the public sector to the private sector, like we have, you creating giant government debts and a lot of prosperity for the private sector, because you're basically printing money and giving it to the to the elites or the wealthiest in the country, and wherever they invest, that what ends up going up. In this world that we're entering right now, where the government is going to become much smaller and the private sector much bigger, you will see a beautiful disbursement of the wealth between the classes. And so I think my real message, my real point is that investors will do well, but who will do even better are the people that actually participate actively in the economy. The United States is a great example. There will be so many new opportunities throughout the Rust Belt, throughout the Mississippi, throughout these areas that have been basically decimated due to globalization and will now come back, that I wouldn't worry about if yield is 5% or 6% or 7% or 8%. I would roll up my sleeves and understand that the opportunity that lies ahead in the next 10 years is America is building a new country, basically. It has not built anything of value or importance in terms of real infrastructure for 50 years. Have you driven the roads in America? They are 50 years old. The houses are 50, like the grid, it's insane. Now that they are going to build all of this, these are multi-billion-dollar projects in your backyard, and you can be part of it. So I think I think the real opportunity is going to be in actually participating in the building of the AI revolution, in the actual building of it. And what's beautiful about it is it doesn't matter where you are or who you are right now. It's a brand new revolution. So just like in the Industrial Revolution, there were farmers that then became railroad magnates, and new cities will build, and you were into real estate. Just forget about your present condition, because it can really be like a quantum leap compared to where you are a few years from now. If you go to where these opportunities will be, I think the United States government will do a lot of opportunity zones, which are tax-free zones. They're going to incentivize people and companies to come in. New cities will be erected. These are huge projects, and that's where I think the real motherlode will be.
Great. Well, tell us about Wealth Research Group and where people can see your portfolio there, and also subscribe to the newsletter.
WealthResearchGroup.com. If you just subscribe on the homepage, it's free, and it's 3 times a week. We publish basically commentary like this, but in 5-minute reads. So if this sort of insight and breakdown and this worldview aligns with something you want to read, then this is what you should expect. My portfolio is again at wealthresearchgroup.com/portfolio. Yeah, that's it.
Great. I'll put a link to those as well as those reports that you mentioned earlier for people who want to check those out. Thank you once again, Lior, for coming on and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us today. This episode has been brought to you by ARC, silver, gold, osmium for all your precious metals needs. Head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.